In a small village named Aiyedun, positioned between the rolling hills and mountains, there was a young girl named Okiki. Her beauty was known throughout the village, with her skin as radiant as the morning sun and eyes that sparkled like the stars of the night. But despite her beautiful appearance, Okiki's life was far from a fairy tale. When Okiki was only 2 years old, tragedy struck her family. Her mother, Iya Okiki, passed away suddenly, leaving her father, Adewale, to care for the young child alone. Heartbroken and overwhelmed by the demands of single parenthood, Adewale soon remarried. His new wife, Yetunde, brought with her a daughter of her own, a 3-year-old girl named Abike. At first, Okiki hoped that her stepmother would bring a new warmth to their home, but it was not long before her hopes were shattered. Yetunde was a woman of cold and calculating nature, and her love was reserved solely for her own daughter, Abike. To her, Okiki was nothing more than a reminder of Adewale's past, which he found difficult to let go. Okiki quickly found herself relegated to the role of a maid in her own home, performing all the household chores, while Yetunde and Abike sat idly by, enjoying the fruits of her labor. Years passed, and Okiki grew into a stunning young woman. Her beauty was like a flower in full bloom, captivating the hearts of every young man in Aiyedun. Suitors began to arrive from all corners of the village, eager to win her hand in marriage. But each time they came, Yetunde will intercept them at the door, her face twisted in a frown. She will hurl insults and threats at them all the time, them away with harsh words and disdain. "You think you can just walk in here and take away my daughter's light?" Yetunde would often yell at Okiki, her voice dripping with venom. "My Abike will marry before you, Okiki. Mark my words." Yetunde's plan was clear. She wanted her daughter Abike to marry first, believing that Abike's chances will diminish if Okiki, with her mesmerizing beauty and gentle spirit, was married before her daughter. And so, one by one, the suitors left, discouraged and fearful of Yetunde's wrath. The villagers watched this injustice with growing anger. They could see the pain in Okiki's eyes, the way her shoulders slumped under the weight of her burdens. They pitied her, but Yetunde's sharp tongue and ruthless demeanor kept them at bay. Even Adewale, lost in his grip and blinded by his new wife's manipulations, failed to see the sufferings of his daughter. In the dead of the night, when the village was quiet and stars twinkled above the mountain, Okiki would steal away to the base of Okeji, the great mountain that loomed over Aiyedun. There, in the shadow of the mighty rock, she would cry out her heart. "Okeji," she would whisper through her tears. "Why must I suffer so? Why does my father not see my pain? Why am I caused to live as a maid in my own home?" The mountain seemed to listen, its massive presence a silent witness to Okiki's sorrow. The villagers often spoke of the spirit that dwelt within Okeji, ancient beings of great power who could see into the hearts of men. Okiki hoped desperately that this spirit would hear her cries and take pity on her. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Still, the suitors kept coming for Okiki, and Yetunde kept driving them away. The villagers grew restless, their anger simmering just beneath the surface. They whispered amongst themselves, speaking of Yetunde's cruelty to Okiki's sufferings. But fear kept them silent. Who were they to challenge Yetunde, a woman so full of rage and spite? Then, one fateful day, a stranger arrived in Aiyedun. He was tall, handsome, young, and with a mysterious air about him. His clothes were rich and fine, his skin as dark and smooth as polished ebony. He called himself Adebayo and claimed to be a wealthy merchant from a distant land. The villagers were captivated by his charm and elegance, but there was something else about Adebayo that caught their attention. His eyes, they were a deep, mesmerizing shade of gold, unlike anything they had ever seen before. Some whispered that he must be a prince in disguise, while others speculated that he was a spirit in human form. Adebayo arrived at Okiki's home with a confidence that made Yetunde pause. She eyed him warily as he introduced himself, his voice smooth as silk. "I have come to seek the hand of Abike, he declared, his eyes glinting with an unusual light. I have heard of her beauty and grace, and I believe she will make a fine wife for me. Yetunde's face lit up with a wicked smile. Finally, a suitor who wanted Abike and not Okiki. She quickly summoned Abike, who appeared with a snub, clearly uninterested in the stranger. But as soon as she laid eyes on Adebayo, her demeanor changed. She was taken by his handsomeness and the promise of wealth that his fine clothes suggested. Over the following days, Adebayo made himself a frequent visitor to their home. He brought gifts of gold and fine silk, showering Abike with attention and flattery. Yetunde was overjoyed, believing her daughter's future to be secure. Okiki, however, watched in silence, a sense of unease growing within her. There was something about Adebayo that unsettled her, a feeling she couldn't just explain. His eyes, so strange and hypnotic, seemed to see through anybody, as if he knew every secret people held in their hearts. And then, late one night, as the village slept under the watchful gaze of the mountain, Okiki was awakened by a soft knock at her door. She opened it to find Adebayo standing there, his golden eyes glowing in the dark. Do not be afraid, Okiki, he said softly. I mean you no harm. I have come to speak with you. Trembling, Okiki stepped aside to let him in. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, fear and curiosity warring within her. I know your pain, Okiki, Adebayo began, his voice gentle and kind. I have heard your cries, felt your tears upon the earth. I am not who I appear to be. I come from the mountain, sent by the spirits who dwell within its depths. They have seen your suffering, and they have sent me to bring justice to your house. Okiki's eyes widened in shock. She had heard tales of the mountain spirits, but she had never truly believed them. Now, here stood one before her, disguised as a man, but with the power of the mountain in his eyes. What will you do? She whispered, fear and hope mingling in her voice. Adebayo smiled, a slow, enigmatic smile that sent a chill down her spine. Do not worry, Okiki. Your pain will soon be avenged. Your stepmother and your stepsister will learn the true meaning of suffering. As he spoke, a strange wind began to blow through the room. It was cold and sharp. The air seemed to crackle with energy, and Okiki felt a shiver run down her spine. She wanted to ask more, to understand what was happening, but Adebayo was already turning to leave. Wait, she called after him. What will happen to them? What will happen to Abike? But Adebayo barely glanced back at her, his golden eyes glinting in the darkness. All will be revealed in time, Okiki, he said softly. Until then, trust in the spirit of the mountain. They have heard your cries, and they will not rest until justice is done. With that, he was gone, leaving Okiki alone in the darkness, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear, hope, and uncertainty. She knew that something was about to change, that her life and the lives of those around her would never be the same again. But whether this change will bring relief or more suffering, she could not yet say. Okiki could only wait, her eyes fixed on the silhouette of OKG in the distance, wondering what the spirit had in store for them all. The days that followed were filled with a tense, unsettling quiet in the village of Aiyedun. Okiki kept to herself, her mind spinning with thoughts of the mysterious Adebayo and his cryptic words. She watched from a distance as Yetunde and Abike were delighted in their newfound attention. Abike, so full of arrogance and disdain, now strutted around the village like a peacock, showing off the gifts Adebayo had bestowed upon her. Yetunde, too, was in high spirits. She boasted to anyone who would listen about her daughter's suitor, a rich and handsome man who had come from a distant land just for Abike. The villagers listened with a mixture of disbelief and fascination, their eyes often flickering to Okiki. They could see the sadness in her eyes and the heaviness in her steps. They wondered what she thought of the strange turn of events, but none dared to speak. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped and the shadows grew long, Adebayo made an announcement. He had decided to marry Abike and wished to do so as soon as possible. The news spread through Aiyedun like wildfire, setting tongues wagging and hearts racing. Why the rush? Some whispered. What is the hurry in his heart? Others nodded knowingly. A man like him, so rich and powerful, perhaps he does not wish to waste any more time. Yetunde, however, saw no reason for concern. She was overjoyed at the prospect of Abike marrying so well and wasted no time in making preparations. She ordered Okiki to work even harder, scrubbing floors, fetching water, and preparing the finest food for the celebrations. But as the wedding day approached, strange things began to happen in the village. It started with a sudden unseasonable chill that swept through the village. The air grew cold and the wind roared like a wounded animal. The elders muttered amongst themselves, saying it was a bad omen. Something is not right, said Baba Ifa, the village elder, who was known for his wisdom and his connection to the spirit world. The spirits are restless. They are trying to tell us something. Then came the dreams. Villagers reported waking in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, their hearts pounding in fear. They spoke of seeing dark shadows moving through the village, whispering in a language they could not understand. Some claimed to see the spirit of the mountain, their faces twisted with anger and sorrow. Okiki too was plagued by these dreams. Every night she saw the face of Adebayo, his golden eyes glowing in an unearthly light. He would reach out to her, his voice echoing in her mind, saying, "The time is near, Okiki. The time for justice is near." Finally, the day of the wedding arrived. The villagers gathered in the open square, eager to witness the union of Abike and Adebayo. Yetunde had spared no expense, decorating the square with flowers and ribbons. Abike wore the finest Yoruba traditional hand-woven ashoke attire, her face glowing with excitement and pride. But as the ceremony began, a strange feeling settled over the crowd. The air grew thick and heavy, as if charged with unseen energy. The villagers glanced at each other, uneasy murmurs rippling through the crowd. Even Yetunde seemed to sense that something was wrong. She looked around, her brow wrinkling in confusion. Then, as the priest raised his hands to begin the blessings, a loud sound echoed through the air. The ground beneath them trembled, and a cold wind swept through the square, blowing out the candles and sending the decorations fluttering. "What is happening?" Abike cried, her eyes wide with fear. Before anyone could answer, a voice boomed out across the square, a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at all at once. It was deep and resonant, like the rumble of thunder. "Aiyedun," the voice called, sending a shiver down the spine of everyone present. "Hear me now." The villagers in shock and looked around, searching for the source of the voice. Then, suddenly, their eyes turned to the mountain. OKG, standing at the base of the mountain, was Adebayo, but he no longer looked like the handsome suitor they had seen before. His clothes were tattered, his eyes burnt with a fierce outer worldly light. His skin seemed to glow with a strange light, and his feet did not even touch the ground. "I am Adebayo," he declared, his voice ringing through the air, "sent by the spirit of OKG to bring justice to this land. I have come to punish those who have wronged the innocent and to restore balance to Aiyedun." The villagers watched in fear, their hearts pounding in their chests. They could feel the power emanating from Adebayo, a power that was not of this world. Yetunde stepped forward, her face twisted with anger and fear. "What is this madness?" she shouted. "You are not spirit. You are a deceiver trying to trick us." But Adebayo merely looked at her and laughed, a sound that sent a chill through the crowd. "You, Yetunde," he said, his voice dripping with contempt, "you have brought pain and suffering to an innocent girl, treating her like a slave in her own home. You have turned away her suitors out of jealousy and spite, and now you shall face the consequences of your actions." With a wave of his hand, the ground beneath Yetunde began to tremble. She seemed uneasy. She screamed. Stumbling backwards as the earth split open at her feet, a thick black smoke began to rise from the cleft, filling the air with a foul, acrid smell. Yetunde screamed, her face contorted with fear. No! Please, have mercy! But Adebayo's eyes were cold and unforgiving. You showed no mercy to Okiki, he replied. You have received none, and you shall receive none in return. The black smoke swirled around Yetunde, wrapping around her like a snake. She struggled and screamed, but there was no escape. The villagers watched in horror as she was fully and slowly pulled into the ground, her screams echoing through the air until they were cut off abruptly. The ground closed up as if it had never opened, leaving no trace of Yetunde behind. A stunned silence fell over the crowd. The villagers stood frozen, their eyes wide with shock. Abike, who had been watching in stunned silence, finally found her voice. She fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Please forgive me. Adebayo, forgive me, please, she cried, looking up at Adebayo with her tear-filled eyes. I don't know. I didn't understand. Adebayo looked down at her, his expression unreadable. You, Abike, have lived a life of selfishness and cruelty. You have scorned your sister and treated her with disdain. But the spirits are without mercy. But you shall have mercy. You shall have a choice. Learn to live with kindness and humility, or suffer the same fate as your mother. Abike nodded frantically, tears streaming down her face. I will, I promise, I will, Adebayo, I will. Adebayo turned his gaze to Okiki, who had been standing silently at the edge of the crowd, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and shock. He gave her a smile, a gentle smile, his golden eyes softening. Your pain has been heard, Okiki, he said. The spirits have answered your cries. You are now free. Live your life as you choose, and know that you are loved and protected by those who dwell within OKIKI'S. With that, Adebayo raised a hand and a bright light enveloped him. The villagers shielded their eyes, and when they looked again, he was gone. The air grew still. The heavy energy lifted from the square. Okiki stood there, her heart pounding in her chest, her eyes still fixed on the mountain. She felt a strange sense of peace wash over her, a warmth she had never felt in years. She knew deep in her heart that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. But as the villagers slowly began to disperse, their eyes filled with fear and wonder, Okiki couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The spirit of Okeji had spoken, but their message was far from finished. The village of Aiyedun was never the same again. In the days that followed the terrifying events at the village square, the atmosphere in Aiyedun was thick with tension and uncertainty. The villagers could not stop talking about what they had witnessed, the disappearance of Yetunde into the earth and the spirit man, Adebayo, who had brought forth the mountain's wrath and had left a deep mark on everyone. Many avoided the path leading to OKIKI'S home, whispering prayers under their breath whenever they passed by, fearing that Yetunde's spirit might still linger, waiting for revenge. Despite the fear and shock that gripped the village, a strange sense of justice settled over Aiyedun. The villagers, who had long felt helpless in the face of Yetunde's cruelty, now felt renewed sense of hope. They have seen with their own eyes that the spirit of OKIKI'S were real and that they would not tolerate injustice. This gave them the courage to stand up for what was right, to protect those who could not protect themselves. OKIKI'S was the center of this newfound strength. Freed from her stepmother's tyranny, she began to blossom in ways no one had ever seen. Her beauty, which had always been evident, now seemed to shine even brighter, her spirit unburdened by the weight of servitude. The villagers began to see her not just as the most beautiful girl in the village, but also as a symbol of resilience and grace. Spirit of OKIKI'S, she whispered, her voice carried away by the wind. I thank you for freeing me from my suffering, but I fear that more is yet to come. Please guide me. Show me the way. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a soft, gentle voice whispered in her ears, so faint she could barely hear it. Trust your heart, Okiki. The path ahead is uncertain, but you are not alone. We are with you. Okiki opened her eyes, her heart pounding in her chest. The voice was gone, but the words lingered, filling her with a strange sense of calm. She knew that whatever lay ahead, she would not face it alone. The spirits of Okeji were with her, watching and guiding her steps. The following morning, the villagers awoke to find a new arrival in Aiyedun, a stranger dressed in simple clothes, with a face half hidden by a wide-brimmed hat. He spoke little, his voice low and raspy, but his eyes were sharp and seemed to take in everything around them. He claimed to be a wanderer passing through on his way to the next village. But there was something about him that set the villagers on edge. Perhaps it was the way he always seemed to be watching, his eyes lingering on Okiki and Abike whenever they passed. Or maybe it was the way he seemed to know things he shouldn't, speaking of events that had happened long before his arrival. The villagers whispered amongst themselves, wondering who this stranger was and what he wanted. Some said he was a spy sent by another village, while others speculated that he was a spirit in disguise come to test them. Okiki too was wary of the newcomer. She could feel his eyes on her whenever she was in the village square, a gaze that felt almost familiar. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had seen him before, though she couldn't quite place where. Then, one evening, as she was walking home from the river, the stranger stepped out from the shadows, blocking her path. His face was still half hidden by his hat, but his eyes were visible now, bright and piercing. "Okiki," he said, his voice low and calm. "I have been watching you." Okiki's heart leapt in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady. "What do you want?" The stranger smiled, a slow, enigmatic smile that sent a shiver down her spine. "I am but a messenger," he replied, "sent to remind you that the spirits are always watching, and they have not forgotten the promise that was made." Okiki's eyes widened in shock. "Adebayo!" she whispered, realization dawning on her. The stranger tipped his hat, revealing the golden eyes that had haunted her dreams. "Indeed," he said softly, "I have returned, Okiki, to see if the choice given to Abike was truly heeded, to see if she has learned the lessons we sought to teach her." Okiki's heart pounded in her chest. "And if she hasn't?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice. Adebayo's smile faded, his expression growing serious. "Then the mountain's justice is not yet complete," he said, "and more must be done." With that, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Okiki standing there, her heart heavy with dread. She knew now that the spirit of Okeji were not finished with them. One evening, as the sun began to set over the village, Okiki decided to confront Abike. She found her stepsister sitting by the river again, staring blankly at the water, as she often did these days. "Abike," Okiki began softly, approaching her with caution, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." Abike looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. "What is it, Okiki?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Okiki took a deep breath, her heart in her chest. "Do you truly regret what happened? Do you truly want to change?" For a moment there was silence. Then Abike's face crumpled and she began to sob. "I don't know, Kiki. I don't know," she cried. "I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I don't want to end up like my mother, but I don't know if I can change who I am." Okiki knelt down beside her, taking her hands in hers. "Abike, change is not easy. It takes time and effort. But if you truly want to be different, if you truly want to make amends, you have to start by being honest with yourself and with the spirit." Abike nodded, wiping tears with the back of her hand. "I want to try," she whispered. "I want to be better. I just don't know how. I don't know if I can." As they spoke, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves on the trees and sending a chill through the air. Okiki looked up, her eyes narrowing as she saw a figure standing at the edge of the forest, watching them. It was Adebayo, his golden eyes glowing softly. He stepped forward, his expression calm but serious. "It's time," he said, his voice carrying over the wind. "The spirits have decided to test your heart, Abike, to see if you have truly learned." Abike stood up, trembling, her eyes wide with fear. What must I do?" she stammered. Adebayo raised a hand, and the air around them seemed to shimmer with a strange ethereal light. "You must face your fears, Abike. You must go to the mountain of Okeji, and there you will find your true self. If you are sincere, if your heart is pure, the mountain will protect you. But if there's darkness within you still, it will be revealed." Abike's face went pale, but she nodded, determination flickering in her eyes. "I will go," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "I will face whatever I must." Okiki felt a surge of pride and fear for her stepsister. She knew this was a dangerous path, but she also knew it was the only way for Abike to find redemption. "I will go with you," she said firmly, stepping forward. Adebayo shook his head. "No, no, no, Okiki. This is her journey. She must go alone." Abike turned to Okiki, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing in me." Okiki nodded, tears in her eyes. "Be strong, Abike. I know you can do this." With a deep breath, Abike turned and began to walk towards the mountain, her steps slow but steady. The villagers watched from a distance, whispering amongst themselves as she made her way up the path to Okeji. They knew what was happening. They had seen the signs, felt the spirit's presence. This was a moment of reckoning. As Abike climbed higher, the wind grew stronger, speeding through the trees and curling around her like a living thing. The path became steeper, the rocks sharper, but she did not stop. She climbed and climbed and climbed, her heart pounding, her breath coming in sighs. Finally, she reached a small clearing near the summit, a place where the earth was bare and the wind was fierce. She stood there alone, her eyes closed, waiting for whatever was to come. The air around her seemed to hum with energy, and she felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. She opened her eyes to find herself surrounded by soft golden light. In the center of the clearing stood Adebayo, his expression calm. "Abike," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "The spirits have heard your cries. They have seen your fears and your desire to change. Now you must prove your sincerity. Speak your truth." Abike took a deep breath, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "I have done terrible things. I have been cruel. I have been selfish and unkind. But I want to be different. I want to be better. I don't want to be like my mother. I want to be like Okiki, strong, kind, and brave. Please help me." Adebayo watched her for a moment, his golden eyes searching her face. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Your heart is true, Abike. The spirits have seen your desire to change, and they have chosen to grant you their mercy. But remember, this is only the beginning. The path to redemption is long and difficult, and you must walk it with courage and humility." As he spoke, the golden light around them began to fade, and the wind died down. Abike felt a warmth spread through her, a feeling of peace and calm that she had never known before. She knew deep in her heart that she had been given a second chance, a chance to start over, to make amends. As for the spirits of Okeji, they remained ever watchful, their presence a constant reminder that justice, though sometimes slow, always finds its way. Okiki knew this well, and she carried the lessons of the mountain with her always, in her heart and in her actions. And so the story of Okiki and Abike, the story of pain, redemption, and the enduring power of love and forgiveness, became a legend in Aiyedun, a legend that will be told for generations to come, a beacon of hope for all who heard it.